H.R. 2501, a bill to require the National Telecommunications and Information Administration and the Federal Communications Commission to update the Memorandum of Understanding on Spectrum Coordination.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, and the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey.
And Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 2501.
Without objection,
And Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
the gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong support of H.R. 2501, the Spectrum Coordination Act. Our country's airwaves are foundational to next-generation wireless networks. These networks offer so much promise to better our lives, as they can promote enhanced telehealth services and educational opportunities and offer new ways of engaging in entertainment and e-commerce. These networks can also help propel advancements in manufacturing and enhance critical public safety communications to save lives. But to achieve these important objectives, our airwaves must be managed competently and correctly. Unfortunately, in recent years, our country has not hit this mark. Instead, the 2 agencies charged by Congress to manage the public's airwaves, the FCC, excuse me, and the National Telecommunications Information Administration, or NTIA, have often bickered and refused to coordinate their efforts. So I'm pleased to see that with new leadership over the last year, the FCC and NTIA have begun to make some headway towards ensuring the federal government once again speaks with one voice in overseeing our airwaves. And H.R. 2501 helps advance the ball even further. This legislation requires the FCC and NTIA to update their Memorandum of Understanding on Spectrum Coordination by the end of this year. The last time this MOU was updated was in 2003, and much has changed since then. An updated MOU will reaffirm the commitment of these 2 agencies to provide and allocate our airways in a way that best services consumers, commercial carriers, and federal agencies in the days and months to come. Over the past several years, the Energy and Commerce Committee has worked on a bipartisan basis on several important telecommunications matters. And I want to commend Subcommittee Chairman Doyle and Representative Bill Rackus for continuing this tradition through their leadership and bipartisan work in advancing this bill out of the committee. I hope the Senate can follow suit soon. So, Madam Speaker, I urge all my colleagues to likewise support the Spectrum Coordination Act in a bipartisan matter, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 2501, the Spectrum Coordination Act, which was introduced by Representative Bill Rackus. For decades, the United States has led the world in wireless innovation. That leadership was built on effective spectrum management. As we look to beat China and usher in the next wave of wireless technology, we must continue to make more spectrum available both for commercial and government uses. As the demand for more wireless technology grows, spectrum management decisions like balancing commercial and government uses have become more complex. For nearly a century, the Federal Communications Commission has effectively managed commercial spectrum use. As the expert technical agency on spectrum matters, the FCC must continue to rely on science and engineering as its guide. Just as the demand for commercial spectrum continues to grow, so does the demand for government spectrum, specifically for use by federal agencies. Access to spectrum is an important ingredient to the missions of the many federal agencies. And of the National Telecommunications Information Administration, the NTIA, is also responsible for managing the federal spectrum uses. The NTIA and the FCC must work together to maintain the United States wireless leadership. And it is essential that the NTIA continues to lead the executive branch's spectrum coordination efforts. To help formalize these coordination efforts, in 2003, the FCC and the NTIA signed a Memorandum of Understanding to coordinate federal and non-federal spectrum matters to ensure our spectrum is put to its highest and best use. This interagency agreement has not been updated in nearly 20 years. Today's legislation requires the FCC and the NTIA to update their MOU to reflect the new spectrum management landscape so the United States will retain its wireless leadership for years to come. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I reserve. I have no additional speakers.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Florida, the co-lead on this legislation, Mr. Bellerakis.
The gentleman
For as
from
much
Florida.
time as he may consume.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the ranking member of the subcommittee and the chairman of the full committee as well for their support. The spectrum landscape has changed dramatically since 2003, Madam Speaker. We increased demand for wireless spectrum, fueling new technologies and possibilities. While spectrum options have occurred over the years, the Memorandum of Understanding between NTIA and the FCC has not been updated to reflect the ever-changing landscape. While these agencies have recently made strides to update the MOU since I introduced this bill last Congress, codifying this action will ensure that these agencies are held accountable to get the job done. After hearing from both the NTIA and the FCC leadership over the last several weeks, I'm glad to see this legislation move forward in the House and encourage the Senate to also see its importance in preventing agency miscommunication as we manage the nation's spectrum. And also wanted to thank Subcommittee Chair Doyle as well. I appreciate it very much, and we need to get this through. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from
Reserve.
Ohio
Balance of our
reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
I continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. At this time, I again would like to recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Balderson, for as much time as he may consume.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Latta from Ohio, my colleague. I rise today in support of H.R. 2501, the Spectrum Coordination Act. Spectrum is a finite and high-demand resource that, when allocated correctly, fuels innovation. The industries that use spectrum are rapidly evolving, and federal coordination of spectrum should involve with it. That is why I'm proud to support the Spectrum Coordination Act, sponsored by my friend, Congressman Bellerakis. While the industries that use spectrum continue to modernize at an accelerating pace, the Memorandum of Understanding between the NTIA and the FCC on spectrum coordination has not been updated since 2003. This common-sense bill would instruct the NTIA and FCC to update their nearly 20-year-old MOU, ensuring that they work together seamlessly to resolve disputes while ensuring spectrum is allocated as efficiently as possible. I strongly urge all of my colleagues to support the Spectrum Coordination Act. I yield back, Madam Speaker.
Yields. Gentleman from Ohio.
No further speakers on this and prepared to close. Well, thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you very much. First, I want to thank the chairman of our Energy and Commerce Committee for helping get this bill to the floor. Greatly appreciate his work and leadership. And also for the members' work on this, and also Mr. Doyle from Pennsylvania as the chair of the Communications and Technology Subcommittee. As we've heard today, that the United States has to retain its leadership in wireless for the years to come, and it really requires the FCC and the NTIA to work together, especially on this MOU, because of the new spectrum management that we have to have out there in the landscape that we have. And so with that, I urge passage of the legislation and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Ohio yields. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I would ask bipartisan support for this bill, which will continue the objective of trying to coordinate better between the two agencies, the FCC and the NTIA. And I yield back.
Gentleman from New Jersey yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2501 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair,
Madam Speaker.
two-thirds being in the affirmative. For what
Ask for the
purpose
yeas and
does the
nays,
gentleman
please.
from Virginia seek recognition?
Ask for the yeas and nays to be recorded, please.
Pursuant to Section